I think it was very smooth. He had 109 people out of hundreds of thousands of travelers, and all we did was vet those people very, very carefully.
Do you respect Putin?
I do respect him.
Do you?
Why? Well, I respect a lot of people, but that doesn't mean I'm going to get along with him.
He's a killer, though. Putin's a killer.
A lot of killers. We got a lot of killers. Why, you think our country's so innocent? Do you think our country's so innocent?
So you're not real bullish on Iran at this point?
No, I'm not bullish. I think they have total disrespect for our country. And I understand that deal, I would have lived with it if they said, okay, we're all together now. But it was just the opposite. It's like they're emboldened. Where they follow our planes, they circle our ships with their little boats.
There was a lot to talk about from that interview. I want to bring in the panel right now. Jonah Goldberg, Senior Editor, National Review. Mercedes Schlapp, columnist for the Washington Times. Susan Page, Washington Bureau Chief at USA Today. And syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer. And good evening to all of you. No lawyers at this table. That might be a first. You know, oral arguments happen tomorrow afternoon. What happens?
Oh, it really depends on which judges are doing it. I don't know who they are. It's a very left-of-center circuit, has always been. I would think just on those facts, my guess is that the Trump administration gets bad news from them. But that said, I think that has more to do with the left-wing politics of that circuit than it has to do with the merits of the case. You know, whatever you think of the merits, whatever you think of the actual policy, you know, Justice Scalia used to have a stamp on his desk that said, stupid but constitutional. And I'm not saying that the Trump policy is stupid. I support most of it. But just because people don't like it doesn't mean it's unconstitutional. The president has broad authority in these kinds of areas, both by statute and by the Constitution, to do these kinds of things. And my guess is if it goes to the Supreme Court, which it would, if it goes that way, it would ultimately end up in Trump's favor.
Is he within his bounds, let's say? If you go back to 1952, the Immigration Act clearly gave the president authority when it comes to national security and who comes in and who does not.
Right. Well, and that's the case that Donald Trump and his team is pushing forward, which is the fact that, yes, it is constitutional. And also, not only that, but Congress has given the president broad authority in terms of determining who can and who cannot come into this country. There's the U.S. Code. Everyone's been talking about it, 1182, saying if it's detrimental to the interest of the United States, they should not allow the entry of foreign nationals or aliens to come into America. So I think, Bill, it really brings up this broader question, which I do think they have a strong legal argument, but I think the politics involved, and you talked about the Supreme Court, think about it, 4-4, if it ends up at a 4-4, because we don't have Gorsuch confirmed, you're going to have the appeals court have that decision, and it won't be overruled.
Let me allow Mike Pence from Sunday, Susan, I'll come to you on this, from the Sunday shows, talking about this order here. Watch here.
Every president has a right to be critical of the other branches of the federal government. I think the American people welcome the candor of this president. We don't appoint judges to our district courts to conduct foreign policy or to make decisions about our national security.
He's making that case too, Susan. If it does indeed, as Jonah points out, if it goes to the U.S. Supreme Court, this could take months in a 4-4 court for now. At some point, maybe Gorsuch is approved, or perhaps that takes longer than some expect. Is there a mechanism by which you can say Yemen, Syria, Libya are failed states, and the U.S. president should have some measure of authority to determine who comes from those states into the United States? In other words, can you do a questionnaire of sorts that would enact more vetting? Perhaps not extreme, but more vetting.
Well, yes. I mean, the United States can set policies that govern immigration, including tough questioning, not just of people from, you know, of people who Americans or the American authorities think could be a threat. Although there is a 1965 law that says you can't discriminate in immigration on basis of national origin. So that may make it somewhat more complicated. Although it's certainly true that the Constitution and statutes give broad authority to the president in this area. I think there is some On Pence's point, saying that the president's within his rights to be critical of the other branches of government, that's certainly true. That was true also for Barack Obama. You know, the court decision from the Ninth Circuit cited the immigration decision that limited the President Obama's ability to change immigration law by executive authority. So this is a frustration that he is not the first president to feel.
What's the outcome, and how long does it take?
Well, I expect we'll get a ruling from the Ninth Circuit quickly, and I think Joan is right. It's the most left-leaning and the most overturned circuit in the country, so that's likely to be anti the immigration executive order. Then you go to the Supreme Court, which is split to 4-4. If it remains so, then the circuit court ruling stands. Now, there's one in the First Circuit, which is contradictory, so that actually will create problems. You're going to have two circuits and no way to adjudicate it. Although I would say the case for the legality and the constitutionality of the order is so strong that I wonder whether or not one of the 4 liberal justices in the Supreme Court would not rule for Trump. Again, this is saying nothing about the wisdom of the policy. But in the ruling from the district court judge who issued the temporary stay, he simply asserted, what you have to determine if you're going to stay in executive order is to say there was a good chance that the stay would be upheld because the order is illegal. The judge gave no reasoning. He made simply a statement of its illegality. You wonder how they're going to look at that in the Ninth Circuit. But there is nothing there, and it's very hard to make that case. So I think in the end, the legality of it will probably end up being upheld. The wisdom, I think, is still a major issue.
A tweet from over the weekend, this was Saturday, from the president on screen now. The opinion of this so-called judge, he tweeted, takes law enforcement away from our country. It's ridiculous and will be overturned. I think that phrase, the so-called judge, Mercedes, that got the left
I probably would have inserted activist judge instead of so-called judge if I were President Trump. The point he was trying to make there, too, is that this federal judge went too broad on the ruling. The fact is that maybe it should have stuck to just the states that filed the lawsuit as opposed to a nationwide restraining order. And this is Donald Trump. I mean, he does not follow the political rules that we know of not criticizing judges, but he feels pretty strongly that this judge got it wrong, and he was not shy about it.
Quickly, if I could.
Look at the upside. He didn't call him a Mexican judge.
There's that.
Charles.
Jonah, what is the calculation when answering questions about Vladimir Putin on behalf of President Trump?
I am not sure that there is one. I will be on record. I think that what he said about Putin was indefensible. What he said about the United States of America was indefensible. It was wrong on the merits. He's said this several times before, similar things, where he denigrates the United States of America, throws America under the bus to defend tyrants like Erdogan in Turkey, like the butchers of Beijing, and like Vladimir Putin. And I think he has it in his head that this is what serious countries do, is they behave the way Vladimir Putin does.
He has said he wants to get along with Russia.
Yeah, well,
you can disagree and still.
But wanting to get along with Russia in and of itself is meaningless. The point is, to what end? And he says it's to fight ISIS. Great, but that is a more complicated argument, and they're not exactly the most reliable ally when it comes to events in the Middle East.
Susan, what is the calculation?
And mystifying even to his allies, even Mitch McConnell, who's been pretty careful to be supportive of President Trump whenever possible, distanced himself from his comments equating Vladimir Putin with American leaders.